Welcome to day 3 of the Collecting Track panels. We've got some awesome panels today, and I'll introduce our speakers shortly. I wanted to, those of you who haven't been around a lot of our panels, inform you about our social area down the hall where a lot of collectors have been hanging out, mingling, trading. It's a sort of a fun area to meet fellow collectors. There have been some scheduled events there also to do patch trades and pin trades and swag trades. So I absolutely encourage you to do that if you haven't stopped by there. So thank you for coming this morning on this this fine spring day. To the weather, I think hopefully will make our next guests feel at home because they're all from Canada. This is an awesome panel on vintage Canadian collectibles. And so I want to introduce our speakers, Elling Hogue, Ross Cuddy, and Ryan Dukes.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. I appreciate you prioritizing this panel over the Mandalorian.
That's right. We're just as exciting.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm Elling Hogue. I'm from Edmonton area in Alberta, and I've been collecting Star Wars for, as an adult collector for nearly 30 years. R2-D2 focus. I like prototypes, Lego, and of course Canadian collectibles.
I'm Ryan Dukes. I'm from Calgary. I've been collecting for 22 years. I do comics, and I have when it comes to the vintage stuff, I have a General Madine focus, so it's pretty random, but it's awesome.
Hi, I'm Ross Cuddy. I'm from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. And I collect Yoda. I'm a Yoda focus collector. I do pre-production and I do Lego. And I've been doing all that for, just about 30 years too. So, all right.
Hard to believe. So the first thing, a lot of presentations, they acknowledge, people that have supported the hobby sort of at the end. We really want to do that up front. For Canadian collectibles, it's a very small market. Population density-wise, Canada is much smaller. But there's been, two people for sure that have been very prominent in, sort of being pioneers of the hobby. And that's Scott Bradley is the very first one. He's based out in Ontario. He has a website, the Canadian Star Wars Gallery, and it's really kind of the archive for Canadian collectibles. It's been around a long time, as you can tell by the URL, and he hasn't updated it very much in terms of its overall look, but the content there is quite invaluable. If you do a basic search for the Canadian Star Wars Gallery, those keywords, it'll bring it up as the number one thing. The second thing, there's a collector, Jim McCallum, who basically wrote the first book on Star Wars collectibles for Canada back in 2000. And these two guys have really been instrumental in sort of establishing where we go in the hobby for Canadian collectibles. A lot of the information that we present today is stuff that they've identified, that other collectors have subsequently built on. And we owe these two gentlemen quite a bit. So with Canada, just like the States and other countries, there's a variety of suppliers, vendors, and stuff like that. The prominent ones that we saw were Kenner Canada, Parker Brothers, OPG, General Mills, and Regal Toy. They've created some very unique items at times. Some of it very low quantity in terms of the number of items they actually produced. But again, quite unique. So Kenner Canada is really the main one. We will talk about other products that aren't just Kenner throughout this presentation, but Kenner is absolutely the staple of vintage Star Wars collecting for pretty much all the countries. So what Kenner Canada was essentially a joint venture between Kenner USA and Irwin Toy, which was a Canadian company. And essentially, Irwin Toy was the exclusive distributor for all things Kenner. So basically, the action figures, toys, the play sets, the core again of the hobby. So, and based in Ontario, so the main populace, majority of Canada's population is out east in Ontario area there. So it was really the hub of everything. And again, population density-wise, Canada, much smaller than the United States. But we obviously had a proportionally less volume of product created. So the numbers that have been identified, it's about 10%. So if you have 10 action figures, produced in the United States, you'd only have one in Canada. So when you're looking for Canadian items, that makes a significant difference. And then if you're condition conscious, to have something in really nice condition as well, again, a far smaller sample set to choose from. So some of the very earliest collectibles we saw in that very first year after Star Wars was released, it was very limited. Just like in the United States and other countries, there were no action figures in '77. I mean, there was nothing until '78. But the very common things that we saw were the Star Wars board game. And we see this across multiple countries. Basically the same game, just rebranding with different languages. Puzzles was a big one, trading cards, paper items that are easy to produce. And then costumes was another one. And as you can see from the photos, very crude, rudimentary costumes. I mean, typical of the era for sure, but then also of the quick turnaround that they were looking for. And again, these would be, the costumes were a different manufacturer than what the US was. In Canada, it was Norbin, and in the United States, it was dominantly rubies as those early costumes. So for the Canadian collectibles, I guess the one thing to maybe illustrate too is that this presentation isn't inclusive of everything that Canada released. We really want to focus on some of the highlights of what makes Canadian collectibles unique compared to the other countries, some of the special things that we had. But there's a lot out there, in addition to what we'll have in this presentation. But again, some of those early pieces, the puzzles, the Parker Brothers is the manufacturer. They only did Star Wars and Jedi puzzles. There were no Empire, which is the same as actually the United States. But what's special about the Canadian ones is that there was, they stuck with the original blue box design, whereas the US ones transitioned into the sort of the black star field. But we got two exclusive puzzle designs for the Star Wars release, and that was the Luke with 3PO and then the Stormtroopers. And then for the Jedi, it was just purple boxes for everything, and we got, again, one special image on that, and that was the Death Star. So, if you're looking, again, for something unique, those would be three good items there.
And it's an upside-down Death Star, just like Rogue One, right?
Absolutely,
See?
just like Rogue
Lucas
One.
was doing it all, man.
Yeah, Canada was leading the pack even before we knew it, so.
Oh, and then, so, like this United States, we had the OPG, was the Canadian cards versus the Topps ones. And we only got the 3 sets of the original Star Wars, no differences in Empire. I only got 1 set of Jedi, where I think there's
Yeah, basically, 132 cards in
Yeah.
that set. Just basically the first set of cards for the Jedi. So again, limited release. They wanted to give Canadians some cards, but figured we didn't need them all.
Yeah. They're like, just be glad with what you get.
Yeah, that's right. Either that, it was the metric system, and we just couldn't
Yeah.
quite get the calculations right.
So yeah, so some of the food products, not a whole lot in those early years, and it's mostly labels and stuff like that. But the most interesting one are the peanut butter peanut butter tops. So if you collected so many proofs of purchase, you could mail away for a poster. But the best thing was if you bought the peanut butter and opened it, in the top of the lid were these six images, and it was like, so as a kid you're like, oh man, Darth Vader's in my peanut butter, awesome.
Yep.
And again, like you're kind of, this is no a pun intended, but you're literally starving for Star Wars content, but they put it in peanut butter. So these are cool images. This is something I keep my eye out for them all the time, but really haven't come across them often anyways. Not in the wild, I guess. So.
Yeah, and other stuff they did. Cereal was a very big one back in the early years there. General Mills, which technically owned Kenner at the time, they produced a number of cereals throughout the years. The very first ones had a promotion for a sticker, and that's the image with the Frankenberry, the blue sticker, but they did all sorts of great sugary cereals that were super nutritious for kids. Second promotion was the Darth Vader was like a mail-away poster, and then they also did like a booklet, or sorry, it wasn't the poster, it was the booklet, essentially what it was, and there's 8 different booklets, and then they had just images from the movie and stuff like that inside. But these cereals in particular, I mean, the Count Chocula, the Trix, Lucky Charms, to find these in Canadian packaging, General Mills, but with the early blue sticker, very, very, very challenging to find.
Yes.
And if anybody in this audience has any friends, collects these things. If you have any of these, with the blue
Let
early
us
Star Wars
know.
sticker,
Let us know.
you let us know.
Gus.
Yeah.
I think Gus, who's like the ultimate, universal
Serial
collector, is still missing a couple of the rare variations
Yep.
from the Canadian packaging. So yeah, they're quite hard to find. We
Yep.
didn't really keep a lot of food packaging and stuff like that. We got our food and we were happy.
That's right. That's right. And the whole concept of collecting, was different back in the late 70s as well. Right now, it's just ingrained. Everything we do, we keep, and it's a collectible. But back then, it was just cereal. It was cool. Eat it, chuck it out.
And hopefully everybody survived the archive party that did the C-3PO cereal eating contest. Hopefully they're all okay.
Yep. So one of my favorite food-related promotions from the early years was with Coca-Cola, and what they had was essentially bottle caps, but rather than having the underside of the bottle cap illustrated like we saw in Japan and in Mexico for Star Wars era, they had the plastic liners that had images. And each of these images, there was 8 in total, they had a different letter, and there was sequencing. You can match these up and actually win money. And I can vividly remember as a kid, my family was big Coca-Cola fans, and fishing the bottle caps out of the Coke machine so that we could basically peel these liners. And I can remember as a kid collecting a bunch of these and having like $5, which again is like nothing today, but as a little kid, $5 was huge. So with these, there's the 2 different styles of bottle caps. There's Coke and Coca-Cola, the 8 different liners. The posters, there's 2 different sizes of the promotional posters, and then there's a bottle cap, or sort of like a Coke bottle hanger, so it would hang over the neck of the bottle and have some design. So, but very cool, very unique.
Okay, so one of the first major licensing deals was, of course, the Marvel comics that were produced just prior to the movie coming out. So in Canada, we had them. All 107 issues. Nothing really too different about the English versions other than the price differences with the conversion rate. We have the 75 cent and the 95 cent variants. But the interesting one is the Editions Heritage, which was a French-Canadian publishing company. They, in Quebec, translated and produced most comics of that era from all the big companies, Marvel, DC, Archie, all those companies did that. So what they did they released a Marvel 3-in-1 title, originally featured X-Men and all that kind of stuff, but leading up to Return of the Jedi, they decided to do a French Star Wars 3-in-1, which featured one Star Wars story, also featured Moon Knight and Power Man and Iron Fist. So it only ran for 10 issues, but they're not too hard to come by. I actually missed out on the issue 1 like 2 weeks ago on eBay, so they won't break the bank either, so don't worry, it's not like the 35-cent variant or anything where you pay hundreds of thousands of dollars now. So it only ran for 10 issues of the Marvel run, but the best cover is of issue 7. If this was young Ryan, French-Canadian Ryan, if he existed, and he saw this on the rack, he would have been like, this is it. I had a dream like this once. Power Man and Iron Fist are going to team up with Han Solo and Chewbacca and fight Stormtroopers and Darth Vader. This is the greatest comic book ever. Then I would have taken it home and read it, and at the end it would have been like, well, that didn't happen at all, and what the heck was Moon Knight doing there? But anyway, that's a great cover. And then leading up to the Return of the Jedi miniseries. Now, the English one is a 4-issue miniseries, whereas they condensed it into the 2 issues for the French release. So the first issue is issues 1 and 2. Issue 2 is 3 and 4. So kind of more of like a double-sized jumbo issue. And that.
Yeah, so we kind of get into the heart of the collectibles again. The action figures, I mean, that's really the bread and butter of the collecting industry. In Canada, we were super fortunate with the designs. In the early Star Wars release, one of the releases was essentially this awesome pyramid logo that you see, and quite distinct, very unique. But it was, Canadian law that you had to have bilingual packaging, and So they, again, at the beginning, they went and had this unique design, and then later they started, well, actually at the beginning they started off and they just had the bi logo, and then they added this pyramid logo, and then they got rid of it again. So it was something that they want to introduce, and I assume likely due to cost, which was the case for many things that we'll see later on, that they ended up eliminating that pyramid logo. But something super unique for Canada is that beautiful pyramid logo.
I just wanted to add something in there just to prove that I'm in this presentation.
Yeah, thanks for that. Next slide.
Yeah.
So, how many Canadians do we have in here? Just put your hands up.
Holy,
oh wow,
yes.
Nice.
That's pretty good. So you guys are all familiar, but maybe other people don't know like why we have, and this will be very brief, I promise. Why we have like both French and English on the packaging. So like in the late '60s, the government at the time, to sort of support the historical and cultural significance of France and French speaking Canadians, the formation of the country, decided that it would be law that packaging and that French would be our second official language. It was English, and then they added French. And so what that meant for producting in Canada was that they had to have both French and English on it, which became problematic, especially when we were importing a lot of stuff from the United States, because they're like, well, 10% of our market is there, and we've got to retool machines and redo graphics and everything. Is it really worth it for us? So that's why you see, the French and the English on the Canadian packaging. That's sort of the historical context of why it's there.
Yep. Excellent. Yeah, so with the packaging, again, like the French language, very prominent throughout. It gave us great graphics, great designs, and for the most part, it was utilized on all the packaging. Occasionally, like the Death Star, very similar to the one released in the United States, that one didn't sport the sort of the French logo. Certainly, the packaging overall, though, was bilingual.
Yeah. And we had two versions of that, did we not? Because one is the standard, pull it out of the top of the box. The other one is almost like a suitcase. So you open it and it flips open.
Yep.
I've seen a few of those. But
Yeah, so the box itself had a
Yeah.
slightly different design. Yep. But lucky for Canada, we actually got two different styles of Death Star.
Yeah.
So there's a chipboard Death Star, which was sort of a hemisphere in design, and it was not unique to Canada. It was also released in Australia and also in the UK under Palatoy and Tall Toys, but certainly not something that was released in the United States here. It's very challenging to see this in good condition. And again, you got chipboard. It's a very large playset. The packaging, the playset itself, once assembled, means a huge pile of chipboard inside this flimsy cardboard box. So a lot of little pieces to lose, plastic to crack. But it is quite a unique and spectacular piece. So, and there are subtle variations, between the three different countries as well.
You'll often see with vintage Star Wars collectibles that some countries will share releases, like the chipboard playset was released in Canada, it was released in the UK, it was released in Australia, which are like known as the Commonwealth countries, sort of the countries that are originated from the the old English Empire.
Yep.
Go Brexit.
And at the end, Ross will be providing an explanation on how
Yes.
Brexit's going to work too. So join us in the.
It doesn't work.
So with a lot of the Canadian collectibles, again with the distribution, there was a number of companies that the stores that sold the Star Wars product, and there's quite a few Canadian collectors that are very keen on the specific price tags for those stores. Again, unique stores for Canada. So Consumers Distributing was a big one across Canada, and it was like almost like a mail order service type of thing.
Yeah, you'd walk into the store, it's just like a big empty store,
Yeah.
and you'd walk in and there'd be like a desk with order forms and catalog, and you would like look through the catalog and it's just like, yeah, okay, I want Jabba the Hutt playset, I want this, I want the personal massager, that's my joke, actually.
Yeah.
And everybody would put that on the code and give it to their friend, hey, go up there, ask for the personal massager. And then you go back, and then they would pull it from the back and bring it to you. For some reason, Canada is really big on just sort of ordering from catalogs.
Yeah.
And, held over from the old days of, the Eaton's catalog and getting, ordering your house, through the catalog and that. So it's a holdover in Canada for many, many years.
Yeah, Consumers was the best. Like, I literally remember going in on a birthday and being like, getting all excited, filling out the form, going through the catalog, and then I'll take Jabba the Hutt. I'll take a Rancor and Jedi Luke, hand them to the lady. She goes in the back, and it's just like, oh man.
Yeah, just like
She's
waiting for
back
Christmas
there.
again.
She's getting them right now. And then sometimes they come out and they might not have something, and you're just like,
But the catalog
this
says.
is the worst store ever.
Yeah.
But those were actually three of the, when I got back into vintage collecting, those were three pieces I purposely went out and got again, just from that, remembering that consumer's experience, so.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, local, I mean, that was like the Walmart of yesteryear kind of thing, and they had their $1.44 days, or if you're super lucky, 2 for $1.44, so you could really load up on some good stuff. And Zellers is kind of that Walmart thing as well. It was around up until actually fairly recently, so it's kind of like the U.S. version of Kmart. So, but yeah, so when you've got these price tags on them, they tell a story, they provide more history and context for that piece, and certainly have provided greater attachment to that item. So. So in addition to the 3 3/4 inch, we also saw the 12-inch figure release in Canada as well. For the most part, we got them all, but it was advertised that we would get them all anyway. But in the end, we never really saw Ben Kenobi, Jawa, or the IG-88 at the very end. Those ones have so far not shown up in Canadian packaging. And again, tied back to the price tag thing, is the only way to tell on those three, if you did find them, if they were Canadian released, would be to have a Canadian-specific retail sticker on it. So.
Sky, correct me if I'm wrong. We have to bring in a French professor here, but it's La Guerre des Étoiles, correct? Des Étoiles. Okay, that's how you. Yeah, La Guerre des Étoiles. La Guerre des Étoiles. Yeah.
So then as we transition from Star Wars into Empire, we drop that awesome pyramid logo, and we just get into the more basic, bilingual packaging. The rare exceptions would be, on some of the play sets or like the mini catalogs, the packing catalogs that you see here. But for the most part, everything was designed in the United States. The card art, the figures were produced overseas, shipped in. So what you're seeing is just a minimal sort of influence, as required by Canadian law. With the packaging, it was certainly not prominent, even though it was released in Canada. Again, having something that was produced in the United States, we have to add Canadian language. And this was actually something that was, I guess known, but sort of even more recently identified by a couple of collectors out in Ontario, Chris Porteous and Toby Black. They interviewed, I guess it was the production manager for Irwin Toy. He was in there from like 76 to 2001, huge long span. Gord Warren was his name. But through him, they met a lady that was responsible for design packaging. And basically everything was shipped up. She did it, and then it went back to the States. But you can see that, it certainly wasn't a priority. So you have, some of the packaging, you have primary, front packaging, and then the back will have a similar image at times. And the troop transport's one of those ones. So there's just basic bilingual packaging information on the front, but then the back gets the more prominent logo. So, even in Canada, the French language, sort of took a back seat.
Yeah, so make sure to check out the Kivecast is episode 95 if you're interested in that interview. It's really great.
Yep,
so
Kivecast.
make sure to check it out.
The Vintage Pod, through the Collector's Archive here, episode 95. And it's quite an interesting article. And then this is sort of a zoom in on a few of those images. So again, like how the logos were added again to the existing U.S. packaging. It was just this basic cut and paste. So on some of the packaging, that doesn't feature very well, you can see just a black box even. Like they didn't try to even gently contour this in at all. It's just like slap a sticker on and get it out the door kind of thing.
Yeah, like with these are probably the most unique to Canada, the transitional card backs. Stickers, I guess, because the card back is the same. Sometimes they slap that big Admiral Akbar sticker on it, but these were just because there's so much overstock, and they're just like, look, we're not printing new cards for these figures. Here's your roll of stickers. Get to work. So, they're pretty rad. They're worth quite a bit now, and I've never really seen too many. I came across a couple of card backs a few years ago in Calgary, just at an antique mall, and they came with loose figures, and I'm not sure they knew what they had, so I was like, hey, how much are these? And they're like, well, this one's 20 and this one's 30, and I was like, that's a sale. And so, because even just finding the card backs is tough now, so.
Yeah, no, they're definitely tough. I mean, so essentially it was just like Empire release figures that were left over that just weren't selling. It's like, we've got the new movie coming out, so how do we brand these things? So they shipped them all back, added 3 additional stickers to these things, and then released them back into the store. So good way to reuse that old stock. So ultimately, and then as we move into Return of the Jedi, again, the packaging design after they eliminated that pyramid logo really isn't too much different. I mean, Star Wars, Empire, Jedi, basic 3 characters, very straightforward. But as we move into Return of the Jedi, the sort of the organization that we saw in Empire, where everything was very clean cut in terms of the releases, we saw things change up a little bit. So in the bottom right, there's the Darth Vader TIE Fighter. So this particular item never made it into an Empire, or sorry, into a Return of the Jedi box. What they did is they released it as a collector series. So it was just a handful of vehicles, or a creature, I guess, Dewback, Land Speeder, Vader's TIE Fighter, and they just took the Star Wars packaging, put on the collector series, and pushed that out as a Return of the Jedi release item. So the pack and catalog will be Jedi, but the packaging itself outside looks like Star Wars, and that was, their way of likely just, they likely branded it as collector, but really it was just the cheap way of doing it, because they didn't have to change the packaging design other than the Starburst. Yeah. In terms of vehicles, play sets, and stuff like that, Millennium Falcon was really the only one that made that transition from Star Wars, Empire to Jedi on the different unique packaging, as the most prominent, vehicle in the entire movie. That was, I guess, the one that really got the effort. But everything else kind of petered out at, after the first release, maybe the second at the best. On the other side here, we got, the Hoth Trooper. So that's an example of Empire figure re-released on Jedi card. Again, same as what we see in other countries, where that figure, just keeps moving along. And into Jedi, very straightforward. Return of the Jedi logo, bilingual packaging, nothing, too crazy there. Then when we move into the other Jedi play sets, the packaging design, again, very similar. But like the Death Star, the original Death Star, the Ewok Village was one that didn't get the sort of the more prominent bilingual language on the front. Again, it would have been one of those white backgrounds where they would have seen stuff there. But like the most important thing as we get into Jedi is that we see things sort of petering out. So Canada didn't get all the vehicles and play sets that the United States would have got. So we didn't see things like, the Imperial Shuttle, Jabba's Dungeon, TIE Interceptor in bilingual Canadian packaging. Those were only U.S. packaging. And what we seem to see is a shift in Kenner's approach that, maybe a combination of them not being able to get enough product in and turn it around in time, but also likely a little bit of a sort of a blatant disregard for the law. It's like, well, they're only going to fine us, whatever, a few thousand or tens of thousands of dollars. We're making so much money on Star Wars. This is such a monster that let's just bring the product in and push it out. And if we get a fine, just pay the fine, because that's going to be cheaper than redesigning and reproducing this stuff with Canadian language. Kind of a unique item for Canada. So during the Return of the Jedi release, there's the different offers. I guess they did it throughout Empire and Jedi, but there'd be offers for whatever action figure. So you mail away, proofs of purchase, and then they would send you a figure in the mail. And one little item that seemed to slip through the quality control here was the 9-num figure. So it has a offer for a free action figure that is 9-num. Yeah. Because everybody needs multiple 9-nums for their armies.
Yeah. And when your mom saw this and was like, this is going to make the best Christmas gift ever, you get a free figure, and then all of a sudden she doesn't read it and you open it and you're like, oh, it's good. I think my mom hates me.
Yep. And we did see this as well. This was, I believe it was Australia with Tall Toys. They had the same sort of 9-num offers. So,
just a quick note about 9-num. They've if you went to the Galaxy's Edge panel, they found like the original voice actor from Kenya who did the voice for 9-num, and they brought him back to do some speaking roles in Galaxy's Edge.
And another funky Canadian item here. So again, with these mail order things that Canadians like to do in the past is that, you'd ask, request a particular figure, and, if they didn't have it, they would send you something else. So here's an example of a figure that was a substitute for what you had ordered. And I'm not exactly sure what the person ordered.
Luke Jedi.
Yeah.
That would have been low,
Ordered a
lower on
yak
the totem
face
pole.
and got this.
But yeah,
You get clout too.
they clearly lost out. I mean, this thing was only probably $1.99. It was marked down to 50 cents, and then that was your replacement figure, so equal or better value. And I can't imagine anything of lesser value. That's for sure. So.
Huh. Yeah, again, as a kid, if this you mailed away and got this, then you're like, I think consumers hates me.
All right, so we get really lucky in Canada with one particular figure. So the final line for the series of figures, the Power of the Force line, United States got the last 17 different figures. Yak Face is one of them, everybody's favorite. Canada didn't get them, but what we did get was the only carded yak face other than Europe. Europe got the tri-logo version. We got the better one, the only one on the Power Force card that was released with the coin. So it's just a pure, unique, awesome packaging for this figure, available only in Canada. We had no other packaging for Power of the Force vehicles.
Yeah, and I guess to clarify, we did receive Power of the Force figures in Canada, but not with the bi-logo or bilingual packaging. So this is the only one in bilingual packaging. So again, back to the price tag thing at the beginning. If you had an Imperial Gunner, for example, or Luke Trooper, to only know that was released in Canada, U.S. packaging, would be to have that unique sort of Canadian sticker. And again, as Canadians, we some of us tend to look for those types of things.
So when you're rushing to market and you got to get stuff out, like what Canada did in the United States with the early bird certificate, Canada had to get some stuff out too. So some of the most highly sought after unique Canadian collectibles are these utility belt sets, which were exclusive to Canada. And there's Luke, Leia, and Darth Vader. And they're very simple packaging using pre-existing things that Kenner had made prior or quickly mocked up to get this out for the Canadian market. So these basically have a blaster, a lightsaber, and a belt. Poor Leia, she didn't get a lightsaber, she gets like a walkie-talkie. Like, where the hell are you guys? And they're very hard to find, and they're very hard to find in good condition.
Yeah. And actually, Ranch Obi-Wan downstairs on the main exhibit floor, they actually have a Darth Vader utility belt set down there on display. So if you want to have a look at one in person, check that out.
So one of the other things that the Canadians got lucky to get was the walking R2. And it was assembled in Canada and released as a bag form in Japan by Takara. And we got it here on card, or it here in Canada on card, bilingual packaging with an 18 back. An interesting story about the walking wind-up R2 is at the time that Star Wars was going full force in merchandising of that, Lucasfilm would get numbers of sets, so a lot of executives would get one of everything that Kenner produced, Kenner United States. George Lucas would get 8 of everything that was produced, plus he demanded one of everything that came from Japan. And his actual, at the time, his favorite Star Wars collectible was the walking wind-up R2. So Canada was very lucky to get George's favorite toy. And this slide is just showing a number of the Sears Canada exclusives. So you could order multi-packs and figures. They were basically just boxes that had baggy figures in them. These ones are exclusive to Sears. There's 12 and 9 packs. These ones came out of the 1979 Christmas Wish Book. And these are also extremely rare and hard to find. I think, what was the last one that sold? Was that a 12-back or 20-back release?
So the box, so I think it was the first 12 box.
Yeah, that was.
But it was just an empty box, I think.
Just empty, and that was, how much was that? That was like,
it was like
15,000 or something.
It was more than that. So
20,000.
It was a lot.
Just to give you an idea that the value of some of
I think it was
these,
upwards of $30,000 US for just the box. So with this, I mean, the first 12, you'd get 12 carded figures in that. They were the 20-back release figures. So just imagine opening a box and just having like a full collection instantly. So these are, again, like very thin cardboard, very tough to find at any given time, but yeah, highly sought after.
So these are the infamous skin-wrapped figures that Canada had.
Not shrink wrapped, it's skin wrapped, is the proper
Skin-wrapped.
vernacular.
Some people will say vacuum sealed. These are sold in Sears multi-packs. If you go back to the last slide there, so you see that seven pack in the bottom left. So you would have those sometimes packed in those. So you have Luke Skywalker in a Hoth outfit versus Hoth battle gear. You have the Han Solo Cloud City outfit versus the Bespin outfit. R2-D2 with periscope versus sensor scope. General Veers, which was a really, really cool one, just because it's just, they just went, hey, General Veers versus AT-AT Commander.
Yeah. So essentially, when they were producing this packaging, they were going off like movie information or just observations themselves. They didn't really have sort of the official titles from the U.S. at that time.
Yeah. So these can also be found with the transition stickers that we talked about previously, and they were also sold individually, not just in the multi-packs.
Yeah. And very basic figure too. I mean, like obviously, there's no card art on the front. The back is just plain white cardboard, super simple.
Canadians like incentives, so we have a lot of stuff that is an incentive to purchase it. So these are some examples of the Kmart Canadian special offer packaging. So the sticker on the outside of the box is promoting the offer. That was the exact same as that of the Sears Canadian Creature Cantina special offer in the case of the Cantina. That contained Yoda that was offered in the same year. So you'd have your Jawa playset, and then the special edition ones would say, yeah, it comes with the Jawa, and then the Cantina one is just like, yeah, okay, we're going to include a Yoda in there because we want you guys to buy this. And these are also very, very hard to find, particularly the Yoda sticker one. These are just some more examples of special offer stickers that you can look for.
And the one prominent difference too between the special offer stuff in the United States versus Canada is that the United States stuff was all bagged figures, little sealed plastic clear baggies, whereas in Canada you were getting carded figures in there. So if you're looking to assemble a playset like this cardboard Death Star, chipboard Death Star, there's two special figures that come with that. It's two stormtroopers. So if you have a loose one that you're looking to complete, you don't need to track now just one Canadian stormtrooper. You got to go for two. So again, like in terms of difficulty, having these complete is very challenging.
Yeah, a lot of people just get the appropriate figure and kind of mix and match it. So it's hard to find the original figure unless it came from a sealed case or from known provenance.
Yeah, and what we also see too is that it's very prescriptive in terms of what figure you're getting early on, and then as things sort of progress, they get a little bit looser. And rather than saying you'll get like one Yoda or two stormtroopers, it's just like special. You're getting a figure kind of thing, and that we just gave them some flexibility on what they were doing.
Yeah, so because, of course, Nelvana, the animation studio in Canada, probably created one of the most infamous or notorious things ever, and that's the Boba Fett animated part of the holiday special. As you can see him there, riding all his glory. They also went on to produce the animated series of Droids and EWOKS cartoons from 85 to 87. It's kind of funny that the impact of these cartoons that were made by a Canadian company are still being felt today, because you can go down on the show floor, and at one of the exclusives is a holiday Fett backpack. So it's interesting to see how something produced in Canada that Lucasfilm is all like, push that down the bench, and never wants to acknowledge, but they keep making product for it. So it's nice to kind of see that legacy continue. And because it's just also really kind of so many of the products, like in Canada we have a few exclusive things, but when you see the impact of the Nelvana animation outside, especially with EWOKS and droids in like countries like Spain and stuff like that, where they got a lot of product featuring this imagery and artwork on it, you're kind of like, All right, Canada worldwide.
Yep. Yep, and with a lot of things, it's like, well, was the cartoon made for the action, to sell action figures, or were the action figures, a symptom the other direction? So, we in Canada, we didn't get anything, special or unique. Again, it was sort of the tail end of everything. So it's like, how can we, quickly and cost effectively get this stuff out? So rather than having, the unique card art on the front that represents each character, they basically just created generic art. So they got one packaging design, and they threw all the figures on that same one. And then to add insult to injury, we didn't even get all the figures. There was no low gray and there was no Wicket on Canadian or on this, generic card packaging. So just sort of phoning it in at the end. When
They're
we get
like, kids don't like Star Wars anymore, do they?
That's right. They just want the action figures.
Yeah.
They're not keeping them carded back then. And then same with the droid series, generic front. And then with the other thing to note too with the Canadian stuff is that because it's generic, there is no identifier for what the character even is. So you just have to look and just kind of guess is what it is. For the droid stuff, the key thing is that there was no Boba Fett released or A-wing pilot for the droid stuff. So nobody needs those good characters. And again, back to the price tag stuff. With the droids, play sets. Role play stuff, nothing was in Canadian packaging. So again, you really need to look back to like what that sticker was. An example here, Thompson Toys, it's a local company in Alberta, might have been Western Canada, but that's the only way you know that this was actually a Canadian release item at that time. So again, just sort of at the end, just whatever was the quickest, most cost-effective way to get product to the market was what they were going for. And but that pretty much wraps up our presentation. So I think so.